She was lying in a hospital bed with a fractured rib and a bruise still fading at her temple, and they stood over her like she was already gone. 3 of them, in the dark, at 3 in the morning. His mother, his brother, and a lawyer holding documents that needed one signature to erase her from the family entirely. She was 22 years old, a young black woman, beautiful, brilliant, and completely alone in that room. Or so they believed. They leaned over her bed and told her the accident had been a warning. They told her the next one would be more conclusive. They placed the papers on her table like she was a transaction to be closed, like 11 days in that hospital had broken something in her that they could simply walk in and collect. What they never stopped to ask was why she was so calm. Because here is what none of them knew. She had known about the betrayal since day 4. She had said nothing. She had waited. And somewhere in that same room, hidden behind a curtain in the dark, her husband, the Korean Mafia boss they called the Ghost of Seoul, had been there the entire time, listening to every single word. What happened next did not go the way any of them planned. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. There is something about a hospital at night that strips everything down to what is real. The noise of the world outside, the city, the negotiations, the threats spoken in quiet rooms over expensive whiskey, all of it disappears. What remains is the sound of machines keeping someone alive, the low hum of fluorescent light behind frosted glass, and the particular silence of a person sleeping in a bed that is not their own. She had been in that bed for 11 days. Her name was Imani, 22 years old, and already she had learned the thing that takes most people a lifetime to understand, that the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody is watching. They were not watching her. They had never watched her. Not really. They had looked at her the way people look at something beautiful and unfamiliar, with the particular mixture of fascination and dismissal that comes from not knowing what something is worth. She was the young woman Hyun-Seo had married. She was the outsider. She was the girl with the honey gold skin and the dark curls and the soft voice who smiled at family dinners and said the right things, and never, not once, let them see what she was actually paying attention to. She had been paying attention to everything. The hospital room was dark except for the green pulse of the cardiac monitor beside her bed. She was asleep when he came in, or she appeared to be, which, as anyone who had truly known her would have understood, were not always the same thing. Hyun-Seo moved through the room the way he moved through every room. Silently, deliberately, with the awareness of a man who had survived by never assuming he was alone. He stood at the edge of her bed for a long time. He was not a man who allowed himself regret. Regret was a luxury that the business did not accommodate, and he had understood that before he was old enough to have anything worth regretting. But there was something that lived below regret, something quieter and more permanent, and he felt it every time he looked at her in that bed. The white blanket, the gold bracelet catching the monitor's glow, the bruise along her temple that was finally beginning to fade. He knew, in the way that he always knew things he did not want to know, that the accident had not been an accident. He had known it since the 3rd day. He had not yet decided what to do with what he knew, which was unusual for him, because he was not a man who delayed decisions. But this decision had edges he had not yet found, and he was still feeling along the perimeter of it when his phone vibrated in his pocket, and everything changed. 3 people. The lobby. His mother. His brother. a woman he recognized as the family's legal instrument of choice when situations required a particular kind of precision. A family visit. At 10 minutes to 3 in the morning, he looked at Ammani sleeping. He looked at the curtain. Later, much later, in the retelling that some of these moments eventually find, people would identify this as the decision that unraveled everything. Not the conspiracy itself, not the confrontation that followed, but this quiet, instinctive choice to step behind the curtain instead of out the door, to listen instead of announce himself, to become, for a few minutes, invisible inside a room where he was supposed to be the most powerful person present. He moved to the far side of the curtain. He stood in the shadow it made, and he waited. The door opened 30 seconds later, and the family of Jang Hyun-Seo walked into the room where his wife lay sleeping, and into a trap that none of them knew had already been set. Soo-yin did not turn on the light. That was the first thing. The detail that a careful person would have noted immediately. And behind the curtain, a careful person did. His mother knew this hospital. She had been told the room number. She had walked the corridor with the confidence of someone who had planned the route in advance. And yet she did not reach for the light switch, which was exactly where light switches always are in rooms like this one, just inside the door to the right. She used her phone instead. A small beam. Directed. Controllable. The kind of light that illuminates only what you point it at, and leaves everything else, including a curtain in the far corner of the room, in darkness. She had not come to visit. She had come to operate. Min-jae followed her in, and then the woman with the folder, and the door closed behind them, with the particular soft finality of a door that someone has taken care not to slam. They stood at the foot of the bed for a moment, the three of them, and Soo-yin moved the light slowly across Imani's face the way you move a light across something you are assessing, rather than someone you are seeing. Behind the curtain, Hyun-seo did not breathe. What his mother said first was not cruel in its words. It was cruel in its logic. The kind of cruelty that presents itself as reason, that wears the clothing of practicality and speaks in the measured tone of someone who has already made peace with what they are about to do. She said that the girl had survived, which was unexpected. She said that survival did not change the underlying situation. She said that the family had an interest to protect, and that interest had always been larger than any single person's comfort, including, she implied without saying directly, the comfort of her own son. Min-jae spoke next. He was less careful than his mother, which was always his flaw, the impatience of a man who believed he was already standing in a position he had not yet earned. He said there were documents. He said the timing was favorable. He said that a woman in a hospital bed, still fragile, still uncertain about what had happened to her and why, would be in a particular psychological state. The kind of state, he suggested, that made people sign things they might not sign when they were standing upright in a room that felt like their own. He was not wrong about the psychology. He was wrong about the specific woman. The light from Soo-yin's phone shifted. It found Imani's face again, and this time Imani's eyes were open. There was no performance in the way she woke. No startled movement, no disorientation. She simply opened her eyes and looked at the three people standing over her bed, and the expression on her face was one that Hyun-seo recognized immediately, because he wore it himself in rooms where he needed the other side to believe they still had the advantage. She let them talk. She let Soo-yin arrange the argument the way Soo-yin always arranged things, in order of escalating pressure, moving from suggestion to implication to something that stopped just short of a direct threat without ever crossing the line that would make it one. She let Min-jae set the folder on the table beside her bed. She let the lawyer place the documents in front of her with the practiced neutrality of someone who processes transactions, not consequences. And then Imani said the thing that made Min-jae's certainty leave his face so completely that it was almost possible to watch it go. She said she knew about the mechanic. She said it the way you say something that has been true for a long time and simply has not been spoken yet. Not as a revelation, not as an accusation, but as a fact being moved from one side of a table to the other. She knew about the mechanic. She knew about the brother. She knew about the message that had been passed through a chain of people who were loyal to her husband in ways that Min-jae had apparently never stopped to map. The folder on the table suddenly looked different. It had arrived as a weapon. It sat there now looking like evidence. Behind the curtain, Hyun-Seo felt something shift inside him that was not quite pride and not quite grief, but lived in the space between them. He had spent 11 days constructing a version of events in which Imani was the person who needed to be protected, shielded from what he knew, managed carefully, kept at a safe distance from the information that might frighten her. He had been building a wall around her without ever asking whether she was already standing on the other side of it. Looking back at him, she had known since the 4th day. She had said nothing. She had waited. And now, in a dark hospital room at 3 a.m, with a fractured rib and a gold bracelet and 11 days of careful silence behind her, Imani Renee Jang looked at her husband's family and told them to leave. Not with fear, not with desperation, with the particular calm of someone who has already won and is simply waiting for the other side to understand it. The room held its breath. That is the only way to describe what happened in the seconds after Imani spoke. The way the air itself seemed to pause, the way the green pulse of the monitor beside her bed kept its rhythm while everything else stopped. Soo-yin's phone light had not moved. It was still pointed at Imani's face, and Imani had not looked away from it. And the stillness between them had the quality of two people who have simultaneously realized that the conversation they thought they were having was never the conversation that was actually happening. Min-jae moved first. He always moved first. It was the thing about him that had always made him effective in certain situations and catastrophic in others. The inability to wait long enough to understand what he was walking into. He reached for the folder on the table, not to take it back, but to push it closer, as if proximity could substitute for leverage he no longer had. He said her name. He said it with the particular edge of a man who is accustomed to his voice being the thing that ends conversations, who has never fully learned that volume and authority are not the same instrument. He told her she did not understand what she was holding against them. He told her that photographs could be explained, that witnesses could be managed, that the kind of information she was describing had a way of becoming unreliable when the people carrying it found themselves in difficult circumstances. He was telling her, in the language that his world used for such things, that she was alone. What he did not know, what none of them knew, was that the curtain behind him had a shadow that did not belong to any of them. Imani looked at Min-jae for a long moment. Then she looked past him, and the look was so brief and so natural that it registered as nothing. A momentary shift of focus, the kind of thing eyes do when a person is thinking. But it was not nothing. It was the look of someone who knows exactly where something is without needing to confirm it. The way you know where a door is in a room you have memorized in the dark. She looked back at Min-jae. She said that she had not sent the photographs anywhere yet. She let that land. Then she said that she had, however, sent instructions. That there was a person, she did not name the person, and the unnamed quality of it was precisely the point, who was waiting for a specific message from her by 4 o'clock in the morning. A message that simply needed to say that everything was fine. If that message did not arrive, the instructions that person was holding would be carried out automatically, without further input from anyone. Soo-yin lowered her phone. For the first time since she had entered the room, the beam of light was no longer pointed at Imani's face. In the new darkness, Soo-yin's expression was harder to read, which may have been why she did it, because the expression on her face was one she had not planned to show anyone in that room. And it was the expression of a woman who has just discovered that the board she thought she was controlling had been set by someone else entirely. She said, very quietly, that Imani was making a significant mistake. Imani said that she had considered that possibility. She said she had considered it for 11 days, lying in that bed with a fractured rib and a great deal of time to think, and that she had arrived at the conclusion that the mistake she would be making by staying silent was considerably more significant than any mistake she might make by speaking. Then Imani said something that she had not planned to say. It came from somewhere below strategy, below the careful architecture of everything she had constructed in those 11 days of silence. She said that she had not married into this family to be removed from it by the people who had never wanted her there. She said that she had married Hyun-Seo. Not the name, not the organization, not the dynasty that Soo-yin had spent 40 years building and controlling and reshaping around her own idea of what it should look like. She had married the man. And the man, whatever else he was, whatever she was still learning about what his life actually contained, had never once made her feel like a problem to be solved. The monitor beside her kept its rhythm, green, steady, unhurried. And then Hyun-Seo stepped out from behind the curtain. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. The moment he moved, the moment his shape emerged from the shadow and became a person standing in that room, the geometry of everything changed. Min-jae turned and went still in the particular way that people go still when they realize the ground beneath them is no longer what they thought it was. The lawyer pressed herself against the wall. Soo-yin turned last, and she turned slowly, with the deliberateness of a woman who understands that how you turn toward something you did not expect reveals more about you than almost anything else you could do. She looked at her son. He looked at her. And in that look was 40 years of everything that had never been said. The boy she had raised for a world that required a particular kind of hardness, and the man he had become, who had apparently developed, somewhere along the way, a capacity for something she had not built into the design. He said he had been there the entire time. He said it quietly. He said it without anger, which was somehow worse than anger would have been, because anger is a response to surprise, and what his voice communicated was not surprise. It was the tone of a man who has finished making a decision he had been making slowly for a very long time, and has simply arrived at the last step. The room waited. Outside, the city continued in its indifference. The monitor kept counting. He began with Min-tae. Not because Min-tae was the most important person in the room. He was not, and he had never been. And perhaps that was the root of everything that had led to this particular moment in this particular room at this particular hour. He began with Min-tae because Min-tae was the hinge, the thing that, once addressed, would allow everything else to close properly. He said the name of the man Min-tae had made a deal with. He said it the way you say the name of something that has already been handled. Not as a revelation, not as a threat, but as a piece of information being placed on a table to establish that the table belongs to you. Min-tae's expression did not collapse all at once. It went the way a structure goes when the foundational element is removed. Not dramatically, not with noise, but with a kind of slow and terrible settling, each layer descending onto the one below it until what remains bears almost no resemblance to what was standing before. Hyun-Seo told him what would happen next. He told him with the same precision he brought to every consequential conversation. Not more words than necessary, not fewer. There was a call to be made. There was an agreement to be dissolved. There was a city that Min-tae would leave, and a sum of money that would follow him there, and a distance that would be maintained between his life and the life he was currently standing inside. He said this was not punishment. He said, and the saying of it was perhaps the most devastating part of everything he said that night, that it was the last thing he intended to do for his brother out of something that had once been love and was now simply memory. Min-tae did not argue. He looked at Ammani once, a look that was not quite an apology and not quite an acknowledgement, but lived somewhere in the territory between them. And then he looked at the floor, and then he left. The lawyer went with him, the folder tucked under her arm, the documents inside it unsigned and now entirely beside the point. The door closed. Soo-yin and her sons stood in the room that her daughter-in-law's breathing had kept quiet for 11 days, and the silence between them was the kind that accumulates over decades rather than minutes. He told her about the apartment in Seoul. He told her about the flight. He told her that her passport and her ticket were already waiting, that the arrangements had been made not in anger, but in the clear-eyed recognition that some distances are necessary, that some separations, made carefully and without hatred, are the only honest form of care that remains available when everything else has been exhausted. Soo-yin listened. She was still holding her phone. The light was off now. She stood in the dim green glow of the monitor with her Chanel bag on her arm and her pearl necklace and her perfect posture, and she looked like what she had always been, a woman who had built something extraordinary and had never once considered that the building of it might require the destruction of something she could not afford to lose. She said that Imani would destroy him. He said that Imani was the only thing that had kept him from destroying himself. The difference between those two sentences was the entire argument, and both of them knew it, and neither of them had anything left to add to it. Soo-yin walked to the door with the posture that never broke, that had never broken in 40 years, not under pressure, not under grief, not under the particular kind of loss that arrives not as an event, but as a slow comprehension of what you have already been living without. She paused at the threshold. She did not turn around. She walked out. The door closed for the last time that night, with the same soft finality as all the others, and the room settled into a silence that felt different from the silences that had preceded it. Lighter, somehow, the way a room feels after a window has been opened and air that has been still for too long is finally allowed to move. Hyun-Seo stood at the door for a moment, with his hand still resting against it. Then he turned. Imani was watching him from the bed. The cashmere blanket was pulled to her waist. Her curls fell across one shoulder, dense and dark against the white of the hospital gown, and the gold star on her bracelet caught the monitor's pulse the way it had caught it every night he had come to sit beside her. Green, and then dim, and then green again. She looked tired in the way that people look tired when they have been holding something heavy for a long time and have finally been allowed to set it down. He walked to the chair beside her bed and sat in it. He did not position himself in front of her. He did not stand over her. He sat beside her, at the level of her. The way you sit beside someone when you are done managing the distance between you and are willing, finally, to simply be in the same place. He told her about the accident. All of it. Not the version he had been constructing in the days since. The managed version. The version with the softened edges and the omissions placed carefully in the spots where the truth was sharpest. The full version. The sequence of events that had begun months before the accident itself. The warnings he had received and chosen to handle quietly. The miscalculation he had made in believing that his management of the situation would be faster than Minjae's escalation of it. He told her that he had been wrong. He said those 4 words without softening them or surrounding them with justification, and they landed in the room with the particular weight of words that a person has never said before in exactly that configuration. Not wrong in the way that events go wrong, not wrong in the way that outcomes fail to match intentions, but wrong in the way that a person is wrong when they choose control over honesty with someone who deserved the honesty. Imani listened to all of it. When he finished, the room was quiet for long enough that the monitor marked several full cycles before either of them spoke again. Then she reached across the narrow space between them and placed her hand over his. Not to comfort him, exactly, and not to forgive him, exactly, but with the particular deliberateness of someone making a choice in real time, deciding in the act of reaching what they are willing to reach toward. She said he could start now. She said it simply. No performance in it. No dramatic weight placed on the words to make them carry more than they already did. Just the statement, offered in the voice of a 22-year-old woman who had spent 11 days in a hospital bed figuring out exactly how much she was and was not willing to accept, and had arrived, on the other side of that calculation, still present, still here. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he turned his hand over beneath hers so that they were no longer hand over hand, but palm against palm. And he stayed. The city outside continued its indifferent turning. The corridor beyond the door went about the quiet business of a hospital at the deep end of the night. And in room 1214, the monitor kept its count, green and steady and unhurried, marking the seconds of a night that had arrived as one thing and was leaving as something else entirely. Neither of them slept. When the first light of morning came through the gap in the curtain, the same curtain that had hidden him, that had made him invisible long enough to hear the truth he needed to hear, it found them still there. His hand in hers, her curls against the pillow, the gold bracelet catching the new light the way it had caught every other light in that room, quietly, without asking for attention. The nurse who came in at 6 for the morning vitals noted only that the patient's husband was present, which was new, and that the patient appeared to be resting, which was good. She did not note the particular quality of the silence in that room. She had no category for it on her chart. But it was there. The silence of 2 people who had survived the same night from different sides of a curtain, and had come out of it, against considerable odds, still facing the same direction. Some things do not have a name in the official record. They happen anyway. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in a room where someone underestimated you completely? Where they looked right at you and saw only what they wanted to see, and never once considered what you actually knew, or what you were quietly capable of? Have you ever had to decide whether to trust someone who failed to protect you, and found that love and truth, offered honestly and without conditions, was the only thing that made that decision possible? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about loyalty, hidden strength, and the kind of truth that changes everything, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.